Hello and welcome back to Steam It with Steve. Today we're going to keep going with the next step in our Python course. We're going to unpackage what object-oriented programming is. So let's jump on in. So here's a really cool image that I found that talks about a cat. So the object is the cat. Now there's two things that are sort of at play with the cat. There's the fields, which are the things that describe the cat or the attributes. And then there's the methods or the actions that the cat can do. So if you come here, the cat has the mood that it can, and hunger and energy. So those are things that is like sort of static data types. And then it has actions. So there's an action that's built into it that is meow. So it makes a noise. And then there's sleep, then there's play, and then there's feed. So the idea here is meow is a hidden function method that's inside the cat. But then anyone that's playing a game that works with this cat can basically choose to sleep, it can choose to play, and then choose to feed. So if it sleeps, the energy goes up by 1, the hunger goes up by 1. If it plays, the mood goes up by 1, but the energy goes down, and then it meows. And then if you feed it, the hunger goes down by 1, the mood goes up by 1, and then it meows. So this is a really cool little mud map describing what happens inside of the object. And notice that we haven't even done any coding yet. So this is a really handy tool when we're trying to get our heads around how to program something before we need to do it. So the learning intentions today is to understand the fundamental concepts of classes and object-oriented programming, which includes methods and attributes. We're going to learn to create and manipulate various GUI components using Qt Builder again. We're then going to develop a basic understanding of good GUI design principles. And then at the end, you'll get the opportunity to build your own simple calculator. Right, so classes. We've talked about this before. The UI class that you've built with Qt Builder is a class. So the idea is it's an object that has two things inside of it. It has methods and then it has attributes as well. So a class is a collection of attributes, which is the data, and then methods, which are the procedures or functions that operate on that data. So you might have a class name and then break it down into the attributes, then the methods. So for example, a circle has a center and then it has the radius. So the circle's here in the center, so that's the coordinate, and then it has a radius that goes around the edge of it. And then we have a method that can calculate the circumference of that circle, but then also the area of that circle. So the first challenge I want you to do is think of anything in the world and name the attributes and methods of that object. And then we'll share back with some of the others. So for example, I've got a car there. So a car has the attributes that it has fuel and a max speed. And then it has the methods of refueling, get the fuel, set the speed, get the speed, and then also drive. There's obviously more things that you could put in. So you could do turning. The whole list that comes out with these methods can be huge. Right? So to have a play, think of a real world object and come back. Cool. So what you should find is some pretty interesting ideas. The really important thing is making sure that you have the attributes and then the methods that interact with those attributes as well. So the good news about object-oriented programming is you've been already doing it already. So Qt Builder pretty much should have shown you implicitly how objects sort of work. So every time that you've dropped and dragged a push button out, for example, this push button is the class. And then the ones that are on the frame is an instance of that class. And the easiest way to think of it is like a stamp. So the stamp itself is the push button, and then the stamp on the ground is the every time that you build a new push button. So we're going to unpackage some of those different classes that we've seen. And the classes that you use to build application, there's a whole heap of them. There's way too many to go through each one. But we're going to go talk about the main ones that are important. So the first one is the frame, which is sort of the canvas that you can put the objects on, then the button, then the combo box, the label, the lists, the radio button, the checkbox, and then the label at the end. So there's a few that you can sort of choose from. Oh, and also the line edit, which is what we've played with before. So GUI class attributes, if you remember on the right-hand side, there was a whole heap here. So if you clicked on that, you could see the font, you could see the dimensions of the frame, You could then change the names, you could change text, you could do all these different things inside of it. And that's the whole point behind the attributes, is it gives you this opportunity to play around with it before you actually have to set anything. Now, by using something like Qt Designer, it gives you this awesome opportunity to play around with them without sort of necessarily knowing how to code them up. And then you can obviously code that later. But yeah, it's really, really cool. So the frame is that canvas that we looked at when we first opened up. So that's the frame there. And the frame is the canvas that you can put the components on. So when you open Qt Designer, basically that main window becomes a blank screen that you can put things on. And the best bit is you just drop and drag and edit the components on this area, which is pretty straightforward. A little bit different though is the coordinates. So with a normal Cartesian plane, basically you always start at 0, 0, and when you want to go in the direction this way to the left, you basically will have a positive x-axis and then a negative x-axis this way. And then when you go up, it's a positive y-axis, and then down is a negative y. With Qt Canvas, it uses sort of a web format, which is a little bit different. So the origin is actually in the top left-hand corner. So that's something just to get your head around so you're aware of this. Now this is, I believe, comes from a web background, because basically if you had a website, you want to start in that coordinate and then go down as long as you can on the page, because then you could obviously scroll down a bit further. So that's the way I sort of visualize it. So you got 0, 0 there, and then if you moved all the way across and it was 500 pixels long, it'd be 500 across and then 0 down. Then if you want to go straight down, it would be 0, 400. Notice that it's not negative 400, so it's just 400. And then if you want to go across to this coordinate here, it's 500, 400. So what you should see is the x-axis works pretty much the same as before. The only difference is the y-axis is flipped. So if we had this coordinate here, this would be at 50, 300. If you had that coordinate there, it'd be 250, 100. So what you should have picked up is the x-axis is exactly the same. The y-axis is the negative version of it though, just so that you're aware. So with a button, when you place it, it's just like in the real world, in different apps, you basically can click on the button and then it makes it activate an event, which is what we've done before with the event listeners. To add a button, it's simple. You just literally click and drag, drop it on, and then resize it after you've instantiated. So instantiated means that when you've placed it on the canvas. So this is an instance of a button. So it's not just a button. We've got to start learning this object-oriented programming language. It's actually an instance of a button. And then the class button is over here in the left. So that describes what the button can do, but then the instance is actually a version of it done in the real world. A combo box is a little bit different. So this is like a drop-down box, and the combo box, like I said, is an input. So you just literally drop and drag that across, and it gives you a variety of options on single lines for the user to choose from. So to add a combo box, really simple, just drop and drag and then resize on the frame. We'll discuss in the future if you want how to add the different options. Don't worry about it yet, but it's actually not that hard. There's heaps of tutorials online how to do it. So a drop-down box looks like this if you had a list of all the different fruits or food that you wanted to choose. And yeah, pretty simple. A label's a little bit different. So the way that a label works is what we've seen before. So when we do an instance of a label and drop it there, we can then change some stuff, basically, which is just the text, the color of the text, the size of the text, the position of the text. And then what we can do then, we're basically based off the label class. So a label displays the text, but it doesn't allow the user to directly input it. So a user shouldn't be able to type into a label. They can only see what the output is. So text is either statically set from the beginning or it's changed within the program. So very similar to what we did when we did the random number generator or the times table output, or even the score from the game before. So to add a label, it's very simple. Just click and drag, hold the label option, and then drag it onto the frame. And then resize it once you've instantiated it. The other one that we have is a Walkman radio, which is helping you to understand how radio buttons work. So it's a bit of an old legacy item. So back in the 80s, these were very popular. And the idea is if you press the play button, the button would be depressed. But then as soon as you press the stop, the play button would be popped back up. So you could only really have one button pressed down at a time. And that's pretty much why they're called radio buttons. So when you look at the radio buttons that you can place, when you click on them, if it's a good program, you should only be able to select one in that grouping, right? So the idea is it basically stops multiple different options. You can only choose one or the other. So when you look at the radio button, it's named after the physical buttons on the old school radio buttons. And basically you select it and you choose one, and then the radio button is grouped inside the panel. So to add a radio button, simply click and drag it onto the frame. And then there's an example there. So t-shirt color, they want you to only choose one. And then the size, you can only choose XL, L, M, or S. A list, a little bit different. So a list is very simple. Same here, drop the list widget. It's similar to a combo box. However, all the options are straight up on the screen. So if you don't have that many, it's actually a pretty good way of doing it. And then you have an up and down arrow that you can sort of move through. So hold down the list option, drag it on, and then resize it to instantiate it. So again, this list widget over here on the left is the class, and then the instance of a list is what is being placed on the screen. Cool. So easiest way I think of it is something like in Microsoft Word, if you want to access the different fonts, you'll have the list there with all the different fonts that are available, the style that you want to do, so regular, italic, bold, italic, and then the size, which is pretty straightforward. You then have a thing called a group box. Now this is a bit more abstract. The idea behind a group box, basically it's similar to a frame. It allows you to group the GUI components together. So what happens then is you have a structure that you can move around on the layout. It also allows you to do different alignment structures. And then if you resize it, it then changes. So there's a really simple example there. And then it just helps sort of pretty out the way that your GUI looks, which is pretty cool. Next, we have a text edit. We've done that before. So the text edit is basically allows you to type input in. So it's very similar to a label, except now you can type it in something into it. It supports multiple lines of code though. So that's a little bit different from just a line input. So text edit basically is a box that has multiple lines inside and then allows you to edit as you want. Then you have a line edit, which is a little bit different. So instead of multiple lines, like the text edit, this only allows you to input one line of text. So that's the main difference here. And that's just a structure thing so that the user knows what it should look like. Yeah, so usually use a line edit if you know it's only going to be one thing. So for example, the first name or something along those lines. So there's 10 commandments on good panel design. This was a bit of fun that I found online. So thou shalt provide clear and always visible labels for each field. Next one, thou shalt be big enough for font size. Thou shalt provide easy tappable areas. Number 4, thou shalt size the input fields according to expected input. Number 5, thou shalt not customize checkboxes and radio buttons. So what that means is don't make radio buttons work like checkboxes and vice versa. Number 6 is thou shalt provide a general error message and a field specific one when things go wrong. Number 7 is thou shalt make it clear what is optional and what is not. Number 8, thou shalt hide what is not needed until it is needed. And number 9, thou shalt minimize the user input so then there's not so many problems. And the lucky last, number 10, thou shalt be clear what type of input is expected. So should they be typing their first name? Should they be clicking on age? There's all these different things. And there's a whole heap more there that are quite good to go through. So the next challenge that I want you to do is create your own version of a calculator app. So try and get the layout sort of looking nice. It doesn't have to be super hardcore, but you can put in radio buttons, you can put in drop boxes, see if you can get a menu going. Doesn't the sky's the limit. So it doesn't need to be functional, so you don't actually have to do the PyCharm code behind the scenes. This is purely just a graphical exercise. And hopefully you can get some ideas of how to drop the buttons on and then maybe even manipulate the way that the buttons look. Cool. So hopefully you had a go at that. Just want to unpackage this with you so that you've seen it. This is called the design cycle. So when we do the design cycle, the idea behind it, it helps you when you're going to go off and build your product. So if you're building your game, for example, which is what a lot of us are going to try and do, is you want to analyze and understand the user activities. So what's going to happen behind the scenes before you go off and build this game. The more the time that you spend analyzing and trying to work out what the user activities are before you build, the easier it is. So there's nothing worse than hacking and hoping and then trying to get something together and then wondering why it's not working. So it's very important that we sort of follow this process. So what happens then is you evaluate with the end users, you produce a paper version of the design, and then you go through this iterative cycle of going over and over through that until you're happy with the design prototype. Once you've done it a couple times, then you go off and produce a dynamic version of it. And then you go through that iterative cycle of testing the executable prototype. Now, you can do some rapid tools. Figma is pretty good as well. But I would still say that's sort of the designing area. It's not exactly building an executable version of it yet. So one of the common questions is, what's the difference between a class and primitive data? Well, actually, we've done this before when we've done strings. So a string, believe it or not, is actually a class when you're dealing with it. So sometimes we need data structures that can store more of the complicated data and then also perform these operations on it as well. So classes use these data structures so that you can instantiate them, do different operations. Like for strings, you might want to measure the length of it. You might want to slice it. You might want to get all the capital letters swapped around. There's a whole heap of things. So if I made a class, general convention is that we use Pascal case. So the first letter is always capitalized. This signifies that it's a class, not just a variable. So when we do box class, the properties of the box is the side length and then the color. So those are variables that are hidden inside of the class. And we'll do more of this class work when we go to Pygame and actually start building your games. So an object is an instance or an occurrence of a class, and the names of the instance always start with lowercase letters or camel case. That's another way to think of it. So for example, my box, first name and height. So believe it or not, when you did the turtle activity, that was a class. So when you create an instance of the class, the turtle, I think we did Leo was the turtle, and then you could access the different methods that are inside of Leo. So you could go leo.forward, leo.back, and all those things. So two objects of the same type of box class. So we've got blue box and then a green box. So a blue box and then a green box. And then I've said the side length of this one is 3, and then the color is blue. But then the side length of the green box is 5, and then the color is green. So what you should have picked up is the properties have been manipulated. And like I said, the blue box and the green box are like stamps. So you've instantiated them and they exist separately, but they are dependent 100% on the box class, which is the actual stamp. So some conclusion questions to think about. How can the concept of classes in programming help organize real world life tasks? What are some everyday applications where good GUI design is crucial? And discuss how the skills that you learned today can be applied in designing real world apps or games. There is a little Kahoot at the end there, which is pretty fun. So have a play at that. And yeah, so there's the last little challenge that I'd like for you to have a crack at. So design a panel for your own application. So it could be a user login, could be another scoring game, might be some sort of Wi-Fi thing connecting. Have a play and see if you can build a non-functional interface. Now, if you do want to connect it into Pygame, that'll be even better. But for now, just try and play with the buttons and put them all into place and see what happens with them. There is also a little bit of homework that's attached to this. So play around with this and hopefully you've picked up something. If you have any questions, please put them in the comments down below. Hopefully you've enjoyed that and you understand a little bit more how object-oriented programming works. We will lean into this a little bit more. So the whole idea of this course is to sort of pepper it in so it's not as overwhelming. And yeah, if you got any questions, please put them in. And if you did enjoy this video, please give us a like and subscribe down below, as it does help with the YouTube algorithm and getting the message out there that Python can be taught to anyone and done well and for free. So hopefully you've enjoyed. Thank you very much. And yeah, see you next time on Steam It with Steve. Adios.